good evening to those of us in Ghana and the UK, those in Canada and the US, it's afternoon. Those in Europe, it's evenings. I thank you very much for joining the conversation today on our COVID Business and Society Seminar Series. These series were instituted as part of our desire as a business school to join the conversation, not only that, but to lead in the discussions on the impact of COVID-19 on business and society. In the past several weeks and months, we have had a series of these sessions. We have had very prominent people speak on these, prominent academics from the US. We've had the president of the Society for Public Administration. We have had professors across the US and Canada and Europe. We have had professors in Ghana. We have also had practitioners, including the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana. We have had the head of civil service speak on this. We have had the country manager for Oxfam speak on this, and several other very prominent scholars and practitioners have very prominent scholars have spoken on this platform. I'm happy to announce that today we have yet a team of two very renowned scholars to speak to us. The first to speak to us is Professor Aminu Mamman. Professor Aminu Mamman was my PhD supervisor, so it tells you what it is that this man has accomplished. He has scholarly and teaching experience, having worked in Australia and in the UK. He's done extensive consultation and consultancy assignments across Africa, across the Saudi Arabian region, and a lot more of very engaging relationship with businesses, with state entities. In the University of Ghana and the University of Manchester, he is in the Global Development Institute, where he has led many researches and trained hundreds, if not thousands, of students and researchers. As I said, there are at least between 5 and 10 Ghanaians that have been supervised by Professor Aminu in terms of PhD supervision. And he himself is, Ghana is his second home. He's originally Nigerian. So anytime that he has to go to Nigeria, he stops over, or when he goes to Nigeria, he stops over here. And I am proud to be associated with him and to be able to host him to speak to us this evening. Professor Aminu has been very passionate. He is somebody who is in HR, so he is in HR, international HR management, organizational studies, and organizational development. So if you check his scholarly works, they span international HR management, HR development, organizational development, and related theories and philosophy. This evening, he is speaking to us on the Ubuntu perspective to global solidarity and collaborations against pandemics. And he is going to bring to bear on today's conversation a significant perspective on the African Ubuntu philosophy and how this philosophy is a worthwhile philosophy to help in dealing and managing with pandemics. Professor Aminu, if you have any slides to share, you can do that. I've enabled you to share slides. But otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you to this evening session. He would speak for up to 30 minutes or so, and then we would open up for conversations. When he is done, I would introduce Dr. Kwame Adom, Dr. Kwame Adom is with us here. And so for this session, let me welcome you, Professor Aminu, to give us your presentation. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Justice. I'm really honored to be invited to speak to my research interests. Recently, I consider this topic, particularly the concept of Ubuntu, as a gift, a gift from Africa to the world. I think while if we consider more the immediate challenge we have today, which is the COVID-19, and we hear about countries donating PPEs, countries donating or contributing to the production of vaccine and therapeutics. A part of from Senegal, perhaps, that managed to be very successful in developing test kits. Africa looked to other countries for support. Now, we need to provide support to the world as well. To me, one of the things that Africa can give to the world in any pandemics, not the current pandemics, is actually a philosophical approach for collaboration when humanity is facing existential challenges. So what I intend to do is to talk briefly about the concept of pandemics, what guides decisions and behavior during emergency such as pandemics, and then go back to say how do humanity in the past used to deal with challenges, and how can we use the past today and the future. So that's the outline of my talk. So pandemics, as you can see, is any phenomena that actually is occurring over a wide area and affecting large proportion of people. So it doesn't have to be health issue. Climate change is a pandemic. Inequality is a pandemic. So the central to the gist of my paper is the idea that in order to defeat any pandemics based on this definition, something that covers a wide area and affecting a lot of people, so how do you deal with it? The way to deal with it is to be like pandemic. That's the way to deal with it. And what does it mean to be like pandemic? There is one central characteristic of pandemic. The central characteristic of pandemic is that it knows no border. Pandemic doesn't recognize any border, whether it's geographical border, whether it is genealogical border. It doesn't recognize it. It doesn't recognize whether you are in Africa or in Asia. It doesn't recognize whether you are black or white. It has no border. So if you want to deal with it, you have to act like it. That's the only way we're going to deal with pandemics. We have to behave like pandemic. We shouldn't have a border, mental border and physical border. Otherwise, pandemic is going to deal with humanity. Then the question is, how can we develop the mindset of no border? what is the philosophical approach? Now, as we shall see later, Ubuntu is the only philosophical approach that Africa, other nations may have their own philosophy, but Africa is the only, or Ubuntu is the only philosophical approach that Africa can deliver in terms of developing a mindset that doesn't recognize physical and biological border, as well as mental border. So that's the general idea of the paper. So now, as I said before, I said, let's understand how we deal with issues now. How do we deal with challenges now? There are two, based on my paper, there are two factors that influence the behavior of during pandemics. One is the rational action theory assumptions. This is an economic perspective to dealing with relationship, whether it is human relationship or national relationship, whether you are talking about politics or economics. The concept of rational action is what guides the behavior of people of today. And that does not, it cuts across whether it is countries in Asia or countries in Africa, Europe or America. They are guided by this philosophy of rational action theory, and we'll see what it is. And the second factor that influences behavior of nation states is identity politics. And we will see what the identity politics is. Now, identity politics is actually influenced or underpinned by rational action theory. So whatever global solidarity people talk about today, and whatever collaboration people talk about today, these are influenced by global economic context, basically the philosophy of economics, and the concept of nation states, and how nations define themselves, and how you define yourself will influence the way you behave. So let's see what rational action theory is. The concept evolved from the idea of enlightenment. Now, rational action theory is built on particular assumption of humans' tendency, their tendency, which is assumed to be universal. It doesn't recognize that some cultures, if I put it that way, might not subscribe to those assumptions, but basically assume that universally people share this idea of rationality in terms of relationship between people or between nations or between groups. And we'll see those assumptions. And based on this assumption, the economic system that we operate today, regardless whether it is countries in Asia or Europe or America or in Africa, our economic system is influenced or underpinned by this idea of rational theory. Now, these are the basic assumptions, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but the most important one, as I highlighted there, is the idea that the individual is the basic unit of analysis, so not the society. And the idea that an individual make decisions based on self-interest. And I will see some example of rational action theory during COVID pandemics. So those assumptions that say that individuals are actors pursuing goals, and those goals are pursued based on self-interest. Behavior of people is a conscious choice by those individuals. And when people are given an option, they choose an option to maximize their interests. And finally, there is this idea that people, when they are making this choice, they have information. And we know people don't have all the information, but the rational action theory assumes so. And you can contrast it with Ubuntu, which is more of a philosophy rather than a rational attempt, a logical attempt to say, okay, let me find a reason why I'm behaving this way. And there is a contrast between Ubuntu and that. Now, how do these, let me go back to, how do these principles reflect themselves during pandemic? Now you can see some example here. We already had about the Chinese authorities withheld information regarding human-to-human transmission. The question is, why did they do it? One reason you could, if they did it, one reason you could speculate is because of identity politics, or it could be for economic reasons. And both, whether it's for economic reason, whether it is for identity politics to protect their own country and give the impression that the disease didn't come from China, is also underpinned by self-interest. So you see that we can see the idea of a border there. And you can see other example, inter-country competition for the purchase of PPE, even within the country, such as US, the states were competing within themselves. So it's almost saying the United States is no longer united, simply because each country is competing. The federal government is competing with the states internationally. There were reports of the federal government hijacking PPE that were bought by some states in the United States. It hijacked it. So this is all how nation states, individuals behave during pandemic. Panic buying by actors and organizations, extortion of PPE and essential goods, organizations sucking, businesses sucking their workers, governments protecting the economy instead of the people. And then that brings the question, who are we serving? What is the economy supposed to serve the people, or the people supposed to serve the economy? So what governments did in some countries decided to say, we better protect the economy, even though a lot of people are being infected. So people are secondary to the economy. So we'll see the contrast again, as I said, with Ubuntu. And these are other examples. Withholding personal information to be used for track and test, failure to use face masks. Some people say it's my personal interest or it's my human rights. Now in pandemic, as I said before, we are not supposed to have border. That border including yourself. You don't draw a border between yourself and the next person, especially when we deal with infectious diseases. But what we have, the manifestation of RAT during pandemics, you have people using that border, both physical and mental border. Now, identity politics, as I said, within the political context, is another factor that it's influencing how we develop solidarity and collaboration. And according to Bigford, identity politics is a political practice by political actors in their effort to influence national policy, either towards isolation or integration. So we've seen manifestation of identity politics in my previous example. And one example is here, the country where I live. Britain was given an opportunity to collaborate with the EU in order to buy PPE, and Britain refused to collaborate. And the main reason is to demonstrate that UK now having Brexit, they are now independent. But you can't do independence in pandemics. Pandemics doesn't recognize Britain or France, doesn't recognize America. It would be stupid to be saying that you go it alone. But this is a manifestation of identity politics, which is underpinned by rational action theory. It's a kind of expression of national identity used for political strategy. Now, I'm going to skip this one. Now, so we've seen two contexts, two factors that influence global solidarity. One is economic, which is guided by rational action theory. We see the political context, which is influenced by identity politics. Now, Richard Haas talks about history, and in his recent book, A Brief History of the World. Now, in that book, he emphasizes the importance of history as so important, if not because it tells us who we are, but particularly it is important because we can learn a lesson. So the question is, what can we learn from our past when it comes to pandemics, when it comes to dealing with challenges for survival? What do we learn? Now, the history of evolution told us human beings are predisposed to work collaboratively, and when people cooperate, they receive equal reward. That's the history of evolution. Rational theory, rational action theory that assume human beings are individualistic, competitive, profit maximizers, has no empirical basis, has no empirical or practical basis. Now, even Charles Darwin, in his research, he argued that the sharing and compassion was the basis for success in human species. So species, generally speaking, not only human, that share tend to thrive and multiply. So before we even get to Ubuntu, there is enough historical evidence that working collaboratively, working with compassion, working without selfish competitive perspective tend to be more, tend to produce better outcomes. So that's the history, what history tells us. And for Ubuntu, as I was saying, Ubuntu provides us an opportunity to contribute to the world when it comes to breaking this boundary, both mental and physical boundary. It's a philosophical approach where solidarity, if you consider RAT that emphasizes solidarity, becomes a competitive, individualistic approach. There has to be negotiation even in the process of building solidarity and collaboration. Ubuntu, on the other hand, is a philosophical thought system, but it is valued for its contribution in decision making. So when you make a decision regarding how to deal with a fellow human, there are certain things that are supposed to guide you, and we will see those things. The first is humanness. So when you talk about collaboration, it's not about profit maximization. It's not about individualistic self-interest based on rational action theory, but rather humanness. Under Ubuntu, humanness is the noble ideal aspired by any African. That's what the theory, what the philosophy tells us. Now, we may ask, for some Africans among us, to what extent this is practiced today? Probably not. And that's why I said before that rational action theory is what guides almost most parts of the world today. But that is not to say that you cannot find elements of Ubuntu in the reservoir of tradition in Africa. As an example, the Ubuntu, the concept of humanness, you could find that in many languages in Africa, even though the word is used, but probably people don't behave according to it. But the concept is there. So if we take a Hausa language, we have what is called mutunci. Mutunci is basically humanness, how to be human. But it's more than that. It's not biological. It's not biological. You have pulaku in Fulfulde, and that is not biological. When you say mutunci or you say pulaku, you are suggesting that there are certain behavior in that person that makes him human. So humanity is not biological. Humanity is behavior as far as Ubuntu is concerned. So now, during pandemic, there is nothing one wishes to, no philosophy that one wishes, that a philosophy that says, we don't care who you are as long as you are human. Because that's what Ubuntu is saying. We don't care where you live, who you are, as long as you are human. You cannot be human until we say you are human. And how do we say you are human? We observe your behavior. And this includes morality, altruism, self and social consciousness, solidarity, acceptance, interconnectedness. But there are certain things that under Ubuntu you have to do in order to become human. You don't become human just by being biologically human. So we can see how this could be used if we are developing a system that says whether a nation is human or not. So we can develop an idea and guidelines as to what every nation and what members of those nations are supposed to do during pandemics. If they do it, they are part of humanity. If they don't do it, they are outside the humanity. And this is the kind of things that in many African societies of the past, the history tells us, if you behave a particular way, you are excommunicated. This is the law, how Africans used to behave. People used to leave their village because they cease to be human, quote and unquote. So we can have that kind of system during pandemics. So in order to conclude this comparison, let's compare how Ubuntu and RAT differ. Under rational action theory, identity of a person is based on biological self. So you have a boundary there. And the focus on doing, competition, self-interest, utility, maximization, survival of the fittest, human nature, motivation as a guide to action. That's how it's supposed to be under Ubuntu, rational, and how we operate. Basically, even Africans don't operate according to Ubuntu. They operate according to rational action theory. Only maybe if one goes to villages, you find a different approach. But Ubuntu, to contrast it, Ubuntu is identity based on humanness acquired through specific behavior, focus of being and becoming. So everybody, as far as Ubuntu is concerned, everybody are becoming. You don't just arrive as a human being. You are always moving towards becoming. Ubuntu recognizes that you cannot acquire all the qualities of humanity. So you are always coming. There's emphasis on solidarity, cooperation, harmony as a guiding principle for motives and action. So they are completely different when one compares the two. Then finally, as I was saying, how do we bring the past, which is Ubuntu, with the present? We have to reframe the concept of self and national construct. How do you define self? Basically, you have to break the border between them and us. No other or self identity. Self ceases to exist temporarily during the pandemic. The new identity will be humanity. People or nation states will cease to be considered human if they don't demonstrate behavior that qualifies them as human. To use the COVID adage and to use the Ubuntu philosophy, I am negative because you are negative. If you are positive, I'm positive because we depend on each other economically in a globalized world. So the idea that I don't care if you are positive with COVID doesn't arise, because if I have to deal with you, then really I have to make sure that you are negative. And that means providing you with all the support. I shouldn't compete with you for PPE, because if I get the PPE, I get everything, and you are still positive, it's meaningless. It doesn't make any sense at all. So that's why it was so stupid to see countries competing among themselves. If there is vaccine in one country and everybody took the vaccine and it becomes effective and others haven't got it, then it doesn't make sense, because you can't interact with them. You can't interact with them. So this is a brief gist. So I'm going to stop here, and then we can have discussion. We have another 20 minutes.
Thank you very much, Professor Aminu. I have a question first.
Okay.
The very insightful conversation, especially around the competition to get access to PPE, and I guess that also global competition in many places in the development arena will mean that
yes,
if one person was developed and the other wasn't developed, and if the
yes,
undeveloped cause problems, the developed will still be in that problem. And so
yes,
this
yes,
is a fundamental challenge to the capitalist conversation and the issue of competition and the
yes,
arguments that competition makes us better.
yes,
But we see that the global movement of resources and human beings are such that they make us so dependent on each other.
yes,
But the use of international travel restrictions as a basis of trying to protect one country against receiving impact from another country, especially the most powerful countries against the less powerful countries. Does it help, as it were, to address the global pandemic and the fact that even if we don't move now, somehow things would get to be mixed up anyway, because globalization tries to pull all of us together? What do you say to global travel restrictions and the attempt to ensure that people don't get to move freely? And how, what do you say? Sorry, you are muted. Sorry, you are muted.
Sorry. I said theoretically, it does make sense. Say, for instance, I will give you an example. If the whole reason why I should wear a mask, if I have COVID, is to protect you. So I protect you. And that is within the concept of Ubuntu. I should, if I protect you, when I recover, I should be able to deal with you. So if we use that in theory, if my country is infected with COVID, I should not allow people who are healthy to come to my country. And that is not to say I don't like people to come to my country, but actually I'm trying to protect them.
Right.
Those coming to my country. On the other hand, if I don't have COVID and others who have COVID want to come to my country, I should stop them from coming to my country, not because I don't like them, because I want to protect the people. Now, you might say, oh, that's counter to Ubuntu. It's not counter to Ubuntu, because in Ubuntu, they and myself are the same. So when I say I'm protecting my people, the people who have COVID should understand, because they know they and me are the same. That's the theory of it. That's the theory of it. However, the practice is different. And the reason why the practice is different is because the world is not operating under Ubuntu. So those who may stop people from moving, the reason why they are stopping people from moving might not be because they want to protect them. So that's why the practical side really doesn't match the Ubuntu philosophical side. But for Ubuntu, there's no problem. You can close your border to protect those who are inside, or to protect those who are healthy, whom you think when they come, they get infected. So philosophically, there's nothing wrong with it, because you are all the same. But in practice, the way we live today is another thing altogether.
Thank you very much, sir. That's really refreshing. The floor is open for interaction. I haven't received questions yet on the chat room, but the floor is open for interaction. If you have a question that you want to ask, you may show by hand on the system, and then I'll allow you to ask your questions. Justice Isa Musa Surugu. Dr. Surugu is a product of our university, but currently based in Germany, where he is a fellow at the UNFCCC. Doctor, please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much. Good evening to all of you, and good afternoon, good morning to those who are different parts of the world. Thank you, Professor Aminu. Thank you, Justice. Prof, I read one of your paper on Ubuntu, and I think my little bit of understanding of Ubuntu comes from your paper. So thanks for putting that square work out there. Reading your paper and also listening to you today, I am a little bit disappointed about the theory, the Ubuntu theory itself. It appears to me that the theory in itself is selfish in its nature, and the theory does not go beyond the rational choice theory. Why am I saying that? You are because I am. It appears that I would be trying to give you a little bit of the food that I have, because I see if I don't give you, when you get angry, you are likely to kill me. So I'm not giving you the food because I want you to live or I love you, but because I want to live, I don't want to die. So if you look at a debate between Glakun and Plato, Glakun had committed, offense in, Athens, and he wanted to run away because they wanted to hang him as a result of the offense that he has committed. Then Plato is saying that there is no justice. If there is really justice, Glakun will not want to run away, because when he was born in Athens, the laws of Athens made the responsibility for his parents to take care of him, and he grew in Athens. And today, if the same law that protected him to grow is, putting him to death, he should stand and die as a responsible man, but he wanted to run away. So if you look at the same perspective from the Ubuntu, I do not see any, something that is quite unique from it. It's almost the same thing as the rational choice, because people really do not want to, go through certain experiences, certain challenges, certain pain. That is why they want to protect their brothers and sisters. So I want you to comment on that. Then the second aspect is that if you have two kids and you have maybe some funds in the house, if you want to put the two in school, that funds will not be, enough to cater for all of them. Will you want to use all the money to educate one? Or do you want to share the money among the two, and at the end of the day, they will not have good education and will not get any benefit from it? And when you comment on the second question, maybe I want to come back, because your response to the second question will allow me to further prove Ubuntu.
Okay, I think your question relates to specifically, the first question relates to this debate that you cannot even define rationality, because the rationality is in the mind, is in the eye of the beholder. And there are, so what you consider rational for one person is irrational for the other, and vice versa. And this debate will never finish. And the second point I would like to relate to this idea of rationality is the idea that every human being, because we are the intelligent beings, we are by nature selfish. That's this debate. That even those people who, for example, they give charity, even a mother who looks after the baby, that she's doing it for selfishness. You see, these are the kind of debate. So you will say, okay, a mother is looking after her baby, because if she doesn't look after her baby, she will feel guilty. Therefore, she's looking after the baby for selfish reasons, so that she doesn't feel guilty. But surely you cannot compare a mother who is looking after her baby with another person who looks after somebody's baby. So the debate never finished. So this point leads me to contrast the point about Ubuntu and the whole idea of this rational action theory is to identify those principles, about that 7 principles, to define it. You go beyond that. But when you define these 7 principles, you explain these 7 principles, they are no way close to Ubuntu. For instance, no Ubuntu, there is no calculation. You are assuming there is calculation. No calculation as in rational theory. Because under Ubuntu, you are supposed to be, not do. That's what it is. You are not supposed even to acquire information, because you rely. First of all, you don't know that you can't acquire all the information. Secondly, you have to rely on others. You don't define boundaries. And most importantly, is your nature as human is tied to others. So that's the debate where somebody was making about a rational action theory and trying to because it's a different paradigm. So you have the terrorists. You have the terrorists that wrap themselves up with bomb and blow them up. And you go and take your rational theory heart to go and do discussion with them. These people don't live in your paradigm. They don't live in this paradigm. They live in another paradigm. So you argue the same argument with the Ubuntu. The paradigm is totally different. But if you use rational action to define Ubuntu, you will find rational action there.
Exactly.
You will always find rational action in Ubuntu if you use the rational action heart. So in terms of, if I remember, your second question was about choosing between two children. Again, under Ubuntu, there is no child. There's no child there. So you are bringing a boundary between one child and another, and you are bringing a boundary between you and the child. And that's another using the boundary. So in Ubuntu, that doesn't come in. So that's why I'm saying, if you wear the hat of rational theory, rational action theory, you will always not understand Ubuntu. Ubuntu is not easy to understand if you don't get out of the paradigm. Because Ubuntu is challenging you to say that you don't exist. And you are insisting that I exist. That's why it becomes difficult for people to understand that. And then these ideas, some people say Ubuntu is disempowering. They say Ubuntu is disempowering, doesn't recognize the individual. That's another argument. The argument is, on the other hand, you're saying actually Ubuntu is the same as rational, is individualistic. The other critique of Ubuntu is saying actually it suppresses people. But you can't separate a person when that person doesn't exist. How are you going to suppress it?
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
If I can come back.
Okay, please.
Right. Thank you, Prof. The reason why I asked you the second question on your ability to take care of your kids is basically trying to look at the developed countries and underdeveloping countries. I work with the UN, and we provide some support to the least developed countries. And I am trying to develop a paper And something that maybe one day when I'm out of the system, I want to develop a paper to look at how we provide support to developing countries. And my proposition is to, it will be the sudden death or slow execution theory. The sudden death is where we decide to put all the resources that we have from the developed countries and select specific countries. So if you look at West Africa, for example, we put all the resources that we have divided into pieces to the developing countries. We use it to develop Nigeria. Then when Nigeria become a big brother, Nigeria will leapfrog all the other countries around it. And that is what I call sudden execution. Because all the resources that we are giving to Nigeria, the other countries are really going to suffer for the first decade, for the first 10 years, that Nigeria will be helped to be developed. So that is my sudden execution. The slow execution is where what we are currently doing. Every year, all the developed countries will give small amount of money to the developing countries, and we are not seeing any transformational change. And that is what the principle of Ubuntu or the philosophy of Ubuntu is doing, because we want to help everybody at the same time. But we have done that and our civilizations collapsed, and our civilization have not been able to withstand. But those who use the rational choice theory, and then they did the cost-benefit analysis and really put resources in other areas and allow certain things to delay, those countries have been able to develop. So when I put these two scenarios together, I would really relegate the theory of Ubuntu to the background, unless you cite recent example to tell me that this community have been able to develop well, they've been able to protect their water bodies, they've been able to, ensure that there is no armed robbery, they've been able to, because of the principle of Ubuntu. Of course, I can give you millions of empirical evidence to show that those who practice the rational choice theory have been able to develop to the point that all of us are looking up to. Thank you.
Yeah, again, let me just come in to respond to this quickly. In management, there was this research to try to find out whether Ubuntu is being practiced, and they couldn't find any. And that's why I said in the beginning of my talk, you won't find Ubuntu. Now, if you don't find Ubuntu, you can't say it doesn't work. How are you going to say it works? Ubuntu is not in practice. Ubuntu is not in practice. That's one point. The second point I would like to say is, people say we are developed. I think you need to read some of the alternative theories of economics that is coming up now, conscious capitalism and other versions. You will find that what we are going through is not development. It's not development. It depends on how you define it. So that's in fact, that's the beauty of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is saying development is human being. Ubuntu, you touch on one important point there. So when you say, okay, there is no crime and all that. Now, the reason why we don't have a lot of crime, say for instance in America, it's not so much because of equality and equity. It's because of sheer brute force, absolute brute force. America has one of the largest concentration of prisoners. That is not development. So that's the second point. The third point I'm gonna say is, if Ghana is developed and Togo is not developed, or Ivory Coast is not developed, Ghana is not developed. Ghana is not developed. Because the West, let's look at it another way also. The world thinks they are developed, but they are destroying the climate. Completely destroying the climate. Is that development? So it depends on the paradigm we have. So that's why I'm saying if we use rationality, then the argument about virtually everything collapses if we operate in that paradigm, because the whole concept of development has to be challenged. What is development? What is development when people are not in peace? When people are not happy? What is development if other people are dying? So development has to be from inside, from Ubuntu. I'm talking from Ubuntu. But if you want talks from another paradigm, okay, I can understand. But Ubuntu is saying you cannot be happy if others are not happy. So Nigeria shouldn't be happy if Ghana is not developed. That's what Ubuntu is saying. But for rational action theory is saying, let me have a border, let me develop. Even if I want to think about Ghana later, I will talk about Ghana later. But Ubuntu is saying to think about Ghana later means I'm not part of Ghana. I'm not part of Ghana. So I have a border, I'm not part of Ghana. I don't care what they are going through. Whether they are dying of hunger, whether they are having problems, I don't care. Let me develop fast. When I finish developing, then I go to Ghana. That's rational action theory. Ubuntu is saying, no, you cannot, whatever you are doing, if you are a human, because that's why Ubuntu starts with humanity. If you are human, you shouldn't be comfortable and happy when somebody is not happy. That's simple as that.
Thank you. Professor Ohimin is joined us from Canada, and I would want to give him the opportunity to make an intervention or ask a question. Professor Ohimin, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself and proceed, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Bawule, and thank you very much for Professor Aminu for that presentation. I, like Dr. Suguru, I haven't read that much about Ubuntu. I've read, I think, 1 or 2 papers about the Ubuntu, the spirituality and human resource. So pardon me if my knowledge is very limited in this area. I'm following up with what Dr. Surugu said. I think Dr. Surugu made a very interesting point, perspective, but let me take it from there. Again, from the rational perspective versus Ubuntu as you discuss it. It seems to me that the research, if you agree with me, seems to be taking what we call a straw man idea that is criticizing just the rational action or the individualistic perspective, when we know that the individualistic perspective also exists in Ubuntu in terms of how things are, as you have explained. So I look at it from, as I said, a straw man, that's the individual action, because we also know that rational action theory, rational perspective have well been criticized, as you made mention. For example, where does institutions in terms of Ubuntu comes in when people are like Fresh Shaft and those people are talking about a rational institutionalism, for example, that the rational person is constrained by institutions. You also made an interesting point about the idea of new theories. For example, where does it fit into the idea of behavioral theory that people are now using to understand behavior? So to me, just focusing Ubuntu versus rational action theory seems to be kind of catching a straw man in which you try to kind of say that, well, this is interesting against this. Where there are other theories, how does it fit Ubuntu challenge the other existing theory? For example, the context theory, where we know that things happen within the context, for example, that instead of just focusing on the rational theory, when rational theory has already been criticized, especially bringing institutions into the discussion.
Yeah, why rational theory is self-evident. Rational theory guides what we do, as I said in the beginning. Virtually every decisions that governments do during pandemics is based on rational theory. Decision individuals did, panic buying and all that is based on rational action theory. So, and as defined by those assumptions. So that's why, because that's the main thing. I'm looking at what's happening now. What's happening, how we behave, how nation states behave, how nation, whether they want to collaborate or not collaborate, is based on rational action theory. So that's the reason. Of course, there are other theories, but those theories, they don't dominate the decisions of nation states. They don't dominate the people. When I go to a supermarket during pandemic, I'm not influenced by other theories. I'm influenced by the rational action theory. So that's the reason. So then why Ubuntu? As I said in the beginning, Ubuntu, because that's the main philosophy, whether we like it or not. These are the things that you find in Africa when they talk. They don't behave that way. And as I said, they try to find where Ubuntu is. They couldn't find it. But if you look at the way we relate to each other, we look at what the language we use, and you look at what African philosophers tell us in their own research, you compare with our language, you see we retain the language, but we haven't retained the behavior. The language is there. You go to I met many Africans from other parts of the country, from other parts of Africa. When we start talking, you bring one example of what's happening. So one example I will give you, I think many of us that live overseas, it's only now I'm beginning to start thinking, you know, you live overseas or you live in a big city in Africa, and you have people talking about relatives. They have what you may call entitlement mentality. If you talk to many Africans, they will tell you entitlement mentality. Where did it come from? What is the source of entitlement mentality? My theory is that if you are to go backwards, you will find it came from Ubuntu. Because they see you automatically as part of them. Even though we interpret it as entitlement, but in the real Ubuntu, that is not entitlement. Because you are part of them. So of course, because we have drawn far away from Ubuntu, so we would think, you know, these people have, which is true. I'm not saying, I'm talking from a rational action perspective. I don't like entitlement mentality, but as a researcher, I want to know where it came from. Where did it come from? Because if you go to other societies, they don't have it. So because we have it, there must be a reason. I don't believe just people woke up one day and they develop this entitlement mentality. I like to believe it came from our origin. So you hear people, Africans complaining, I have given something to somebody to help so that we can do business together, or so that we can, but this guy take it as his personal property. The question, where did this idea of taking things as your personal property came from? I want to think there is a source of it. But because we are not doing research about it, we think it's just misbehavior, deviance, and all that. I would like to think that there's something beyond deviance. There's something beyond that, because even if you go to the villages, you will have stories, something similar. So the reason why I'm comparing Ubuntu with rational action theory is simply because these are, on one hand, the Western, or rather the global context, whether politics or economics is rational action theory is dominant. That is not to say there are theories. On the other hand, in Africa, if you want to go back to Africa and you want to say, okay, what kind of approach should I consider as African that can help me to understand how Africans behave or how they used to behave? And that's Ubuntu. Finally, I'm not saying that if you dissect any theory, by the way, Ubuntu is not even theory, it's just a philosophy.
Okay.
So if you dissect any philosophical understanding and put it through kind of investigation, you may find some overlap. For instance, Max was saying all these principles of Ubuntu, you'll find it in Asia. Harmony and intercoordinates and all that, you find it in Asia. You could find it in the Western philosophy. But what makes African different? Because it was dominant. Nobody in the West doesn't like justice, fairness. Nobody in Asia doesn't like. So what makes it African? What makes it African is the historical and dominance of it. Not because that philosophy doesn't exist in other parts of the world. And as I said in the beginning, the evolution of humanity wasn't based on this, our definition of rational act theory today. It wasn't based on that. The evolution of species was based on cooperation and collaboration. Otherwise, we won't be here. If there was no cooperation, we wouldn't be sitting down here talking. Our species would have gone a long time ago. If for instance, based on the theory of evolution, if everybody say, let me develop first before the other ones develop, I tell you, there won't be humanity today. So that's the thing. But I accept any philosophy, any theory, when you subject it to analysis, you will find it wanting in one area or the other. So I'm not saying that Ubuntu hasn't got. And after all, if it is that good, why you could argue why is Ubuntu not be spread as the Europe of the world? So there are some weaknesses in the way, but that does not mean we can throw the baby with the bathwater.
Definitely.
Let me jump in. Dr. Prof, can I just quickly, before I have to leave?
Yes, please.
Thanks for highlighting that, because I mean, when we were talking, I asked myself, what about the cultures in Asia and other places where they have the same kind of principle embedded in that? And I think coming back to what Dr. Suguru was saying, and what I was making the fact is that in most of these cases, what I wanted to see is that, for example, in Ubuntu philosophical idea, when you have to do research, how does institutions, for example, constrain people for them to engage or disengage that rational action that you are talking about, so that they go back to then the community idea, or what do you call the entitlement mentality? Aren't people also behaving rationally that maybe, for example, I think Dr. Suguru made an interesting point. We know some people whose parents and grandparents have sold lands and farms and whatever to go to, for example, abroad to bring in some greener pastures. And as a result, people sit home and say, well, we sold the family land, therefore I'm also entitled to whatever you get, without understanding maybe the conditions and everything that surrounds you on how you bring the money. How do you bring institutions into this idea of Ubuntu as a way to constrain the way people behave?
Yeah, I think to bring a formal institution, I mean, Ubuntu is an informal institution. I think the formal institution, and again, that's the thing, we already know. I think it's a good point. I mean, that's my interest now, is that our formal institutions have failed. Formal institution hasn't stopped us from looting a property. There's so many things. So we keep talking about this formality thing. So the idea of Ubuntu, actually, it becomes an informal institution. When people are inculcated with the idea of that, if I take somebody's property, actually like I'm taking, and if I hurt someone, it's like I'm hurting myself. So that is the informal institution. Because the formal institution in Africa, frankly, has failed, completely failed. We have some semblance of structures and all those things, but it hasn't stopped people from misbehaving. We have education, producing graduates and all that, but it hasn't changed the behavior of people. So Yes, we should have institution, but I'm skeptical about formal institution, because the formal institution, no matter how you design it, if as somebody was saying, an African proverb, changing the pot will not change the taste of the soup. So those institutions, they are like pots, but the soup are the human being inside them. If you don't change them through certain values, you can develop whatever institutions you like. They can do. So what my argument is that let's have a kind of Ubuntu-like values that when I'm in that institutions, I know if I do something wrong with it, would hurt somebody else. Otherwise, putting me in an institution, giving me certain rules and regulation when it is not inside my heart, it's not regulating my behavior. We've seen the outcome of it, just like we've seen the outcome of development. So we talk about development when we are killing ourselves. There is a house of proverb or some African proverb that says it's like progress of a well digger. You know, when somebody is digging a well, the more he makes progress, the farther down he goes. So the world development today is like a progress of a well digger. We are digging a well, getting deeper inside, and we are calling it development. We are calling it progress. We are decimating the ozone layer. We are polluting the environment. We are doing all sorts of things, and we are calling it development. An Ubuntu person maybe 2,000 years ago would be laughing at us.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the conversation is getting a bit exciting, too exciting, and people are coming up now. But I am afraid that I have to move to the next speaker. So Dr. Asiama, please pardon me so that I can move to the next speaker because of our time. When we get to the end and there is some more time, we can get back to the conversation of Ubuntu. But I wanted to talk about institutions, as Prof. Kwame asked. Within the traditional system, there have been institutions. So if you were a rapist and your behavior was against the system, you were excommunicated, you were banished. They were strong, institutional, albeit informal institutional systems that actually made sure that people could conform or would conform to the systems that had been set up. And I agree with Aminu that modern institutional setups of modern states, especially within the less developed countries, have actually failed to be able to, and if you like, even in advanced societies. So the police system in the US, for example, is supposed to provide protection to the people. It has become that which is actually destroying the people. So, but this conversation will go on, and I'm excited that it started here. We will keep going on. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Dr. Kwame Adom, who is our second presenter for this evening. Dr. Kwame Adom is a senior lecturer in the Department of Marketing and Entrepreneurship, and also the senior hall tutor of the Mensa Sabah Hall. Dr. Kwame Adom is somebody whose specialty is in the area of entrepreneurship, small business growth, and SME development. So if you check his profile, you will see that he is working very actively in that space. He is the CEO of the Entrepreneurs Clinic, which is a research and consultancy think tank that he uses to deliver his expertise to the SME world. And I'm happy to say that through that vehicle, he's been able to make significant impact on businesses. He's a regular presenter and feature on many FM stations and TV stations where he talks to the SME community and also helping to shape government policy on SME development. This evening, he's talking to us on surviving in crisis, a strategic response to COVID for SMEs. Dr. Kwame Adom, I have enabled you to share your slides, so if you have slides to share, you may do so, and you can speak up to 30 minutes so we can have a conversation. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you making time to speak to us this evening.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Professor Bawule. Let me share the slides and then make a few opening remarks. Okay, good evening to you all and welcome to the second presentation, which is on surviving in crisis, a strategic response to COVID-19 for SMEs. But before we start the presentation, let me also say that Professor Bawule, as a student of Ubuntu, was highly influenced by the philosophical direction of Ubuntu, and he allowed us to go beyond the time. Look, we're supposed to finish at 6:55. And because of Ubuntu influence, you know, one baggage that Ubuntu has is empathy. And yes, we can't run away from that. We always try to put ourselves in other people's shoes or stead.
I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah. So we're still talking about Ubuntu. But let me take this opportunity to thank Prof. Aminu for his excellent presentation. In fact, I learned a lot from his presentation. More importantly, the rational action theory, which is also the basis for entrepreneurial decision-making. Entrepreneurs make decisions based on rational actions. So I found that to be more useful for my presentation. My presentation is not going to be more of academic type of presentation. Rather, the SME guys who are also on the platform will benefit from the practical aspect of what we do as academics. It's not always, so I'm going to piggyback on Prof. Amidu's theory. So we have that as the underlying theory for my presentation as well, the rational action theory. So let's have a little look at my outline for today's presentation. Overview of the presentation, re-examine your enterprise or your business, supporting employees, customers and suppliers in times like this, like COVID period, reintroduce yourself, reasserting yourself as an entrepreneur, as owner of an SME, so that you become meaningful to society and not just to yourself. So these and the other headings we are going to look at. I'm not going to also discuss or explain what a crisis is. Again, I took advantage of what Prof. Amidu discussed earlier by highlighting what is a pandemic, a global issue, and it's not just a disease. It could be any catastrophe that will hit the whole world. So if it has a worldwide dimension, then we can look at it as a pandemic, as we have with the COVID-19. But the question I want to ask, which maybe later at the end of the presentation, my colleague academics will also try to debate, is a crisis a bad news or a good news, especially for SMEs? When the whole world was hit by this pandemic, people were going about their normal duties, all of a sudden this happened. My question is this a bad news or a good news? At the end of the presentation, I will also want to ask that we try to answer that question. It is a common knowledge that one should never let a good crisis go waste. So in every crisis, there are winners and losers. It is not everybody who is crying under COVID-19. Some people are very, very happy. And some of us on the platform are beneficiaries of COVID in terms of always smiling, always happy, because we are getting certain things that without the pandemic or COVID, wouldn't have gotten them. So that's good news for us. But to the SMEs, I have a caution for them. This is the time that people think about making supernormal profits or abnormal profits. But they have to be very careful. Because much as we have winners during every crisis, we also have losers. But the winners in the short-term period, if they are not careful, will become losers in the long term. And I have few examples that I will cite for us to appreciate this position. So my advice to SMEs at this stage is that they shouldn't embark on any hoarding journey. Don't buy and decide to keep it so that in the near future you can sell to make more profit. It's not a good thing. Don't overstock. Don't buy in large quantities, hoping that you'll be a monopolist within a short time. So everybody will come to your business. That is also dangerous. And Prof. Amidu mentioned extortion as part of the rational action behavior. People extort others because they want to make more money. In this COVID era, if you try to do that, you'll be a loser in the end. And more importantly, SMEs should limit the creation of new businesses. And they should also invest wisely. So let me give practical example to some of these things that is happening within Ghana, for example. When COVID started, first week March, there was COVID in Ghana. So Accra came under partial lockdown. And at the time, people were buying a lot in terms of the so-called immune booster medicine. One critical medicine that I will use in this presentation is Coa FX. I'm a victim of this product. Why? Because overnight, the whole country thought that if you want to stay out of trouble, you need this product. I bought this for 300 Ghana cedis. The original price before COVID was 120, 80 cedis somewhere. But during COVID, early days of COVID, this was sold at 300 Ghana cedis. Some places it was more than that. Then within few weeks, FDA came out to say that people should not consume this product because they found something wrong with this product and it's not good for human consumption. A lot of people lost huge sums of money. Those who overstocked, those who were hoarding it, those who tried to create new businesses out of this were all in trouble. So that's the caution that I'm giving SMEs this evening. Now let's move into a little more interesting stuff for SMEs. To survive in this, re-examine your enterprise, your business focus. Remember the current marketplace is different. As we all say, we are not in normal times. So if you are not in normal times, then you have to be very careful. Else you'll be in trouble as a business. Reassess your vision as a business, your mission, goals, and objectives to accommodate the changes that are taking place in terms of your customers and also your competitors, so that you can reassert yourself as a business and be meaningful to your constituent or your audience. Add purpose to your business. So start measuring customer satisfaction and welfare instead of profit. People are thinking about profit all the time, but this is not the time to think only about profit. So again, I'll make reference to Ubuntu at this point in time, because if you think about your brother, you will not extort your brother. So those who are earning for abnormal profit because of COVID, a classical example would be the pharmaceutical industry. Overnight, every medicine or every drug, over-counter drugs were all expensive. They changed their price tag because we were in need of that medicine. So doing well by doing good must be the focus. So businesses should not only think about making profit, but think about the impact that your business is having on society. So here we'll look at the double or triple bottom line as in social entrepreneurship. So we are not just interested in making money. So this will go against the rational action theory, where decisions are based on rationality, the cost-benefit analysis of situations. But in times like this, you need to also think about the customer, think about the people you are doing business with, and don't just focus on profits. Remember, we are all in this together. So don't struggle alone. Form partnership. Be like a Liverpool supporter, you never walk alone. In crisis, if you try to walk alone in crisis, you will not be successful or you won't succeed. So form alliances, build networks, partnership in crisis. And this will ensure that there is a win-win approach among stakeholders going forward. Involve all other stakeholders. Support employees, customers, and suppliers. So concentrate on employee welfare and their health, and make sure there is also effective communication. How do you reach out to your workers who are at home? Overnight, some businesses could not continue because of lockdown, because of COVID protocol observation and things like that. You cannot bring your, so consciously promote flexibility. Example, telecommuting is becoming a popular thing. That is working from home, wherever you find yourself, you can do your work so long as you are making progress or you are meeting your organizational objectives. Look at the beauty of this Zoom meeting. People joining us from US, from Canada, from UK, Germany, and other places in the world. It's all because of COVID. So you also have to be flexible as a business owner by encouraging your workers to adapt new behaviors that will go a long way to promote your business as well. Be as generous and realistic as possible. As a business owner, you should also realize the situation everybody finds himself or herself, and don't just focus on you as the business owner. Empathize and understand customers. So again, I will leverage on the Ubuntu idea. Listen with empathy, acknowledge and respond appropriately while keeping the line with core values and beliefs. You cannot throw away what you believe in as a business, regardless the situation you find yourself. Rather, you adjust where necessary and make sure you still keep to your core values, the good values that people know about your business. Communicate essential information while balancing the need to still tell your story in a meaningful way to your workers, to your customers. We are all in Ghana when Association of Private Secondary Schools or other private educational institutions were pleading with the government to come to their aid in terms of meeting their wage bill, because these people depend heavily on the school fees and other payments from students. And because all institutions, especially the second cycle private schools and some tertiary institutions, were all closed, and therefore they couldn't raise any money to pay their workers. And as I speak now, they are still in talks with the government to have a little sympathy on them, so that they will be able to meet at least half of their wage bill or something like that. In this, you have to reintroduce yourself. There's an opportunity to retell your story, the good old days when you were making a huge impact in society. You can now retell the story. Your COVID response, health and safety protocols for workers. Look at business school. As soon as you enter the business school, at the security, they will check your temperature. So far, I haven't heard of anybody having a temperature above the normal temperature. So that's a good thing for business school. But it's essential for organizations or SMEs to ensure that they observe all the COVID protocols. Stories that reinforce your corporate mission and your values. All the things that we are doing, we are trying to reinforce what we believe in as an organization. And I'm using business school as also an SME, because we really run business at the business school. We have to be very genuine, very authentic. We shouldn't fake it. The things that we cannot do, we should let everybody know, from workers to suppliers and everybody. We shouldn't fake anything. Be yourself, but don't forget, stay committed to your core values and beliefs. So that is what defines your brand as a business. So if you try to depart from your core values, then you are no more, let's say, business school or that business. So stay committed to your core values and your beliefs. This is not the time to tell customers that you are going to do what you were not doing for them. It's important that you don't try to influence customers by telling them things that you don't have resources to do for them, because you want to retain or you want to attract customers. That is why we are saying be authentic, be yourself, and do things that you have core competence to do, things that were exciting your customers. Keep doing those things, and don't give them any false hope that we're going to do this tomorrow. Don't be like, forgive me, the politicians, as they are going about promising the electorates that, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that. SMEs should not be like politicians, because whatever you promise your customers, remember, your brand is your promise. So don't just promise because you want to attract customers or retain them. Assessing your distribution channel. A lot of businesses never thought they could do delivery or home delivery to customers, but COVID has taught them a lesson. So consciously move most loyal customers to online. Some could order the product online, pick from your store, or you deliver at their doorsteps. These are things that you can do just for survival in this COVID time and going forward. Tell customers how the business is working hard to make shopping safer and more convenient. When the COVID measures were in place, we could not go and sit at any restaurant and enjoy our meals as we used to. Some places you even have to stay outside, and the workers or those inside will bring you your food. But we've managed that, and some businesses are still struggling with that. But tell your customers how your place is safer to do business so that they will still come. there are certain things that we also need to educate our customers, provide guided tutorials. How many of us can even order food using your mobile phone or using your computer at home? So it's important for businesses, SMEs, to from time to time educate or have some tutorial sessions for customers and provide reward scheme for users of the new channel. Because for some of us, we still want to behave like we are in normal times. So you need to reward the new behaviors that some customers will exhibit. In terms of your marketing, rethink your marketing budget. Increase your marketing effort because others have stopped. If you don't increase your marketing activity, remember, you are not in days that you wait for a customer or we're going back to the old tradition where the belief is that production is in anticipation of demand. So you can have products in your shop and you wait, you pray to God so that customers will pass by. No, you need to consciously invest in your marketing activity. Make sure you commit more resources because the little advertising money can go a long way. The little money or the little extra investment in terms of marketing activity will help you recoup that investment. Gain market share and be the dominant voice whilst others are sleeping. In times like this, a lot of SMEs have given up. Some are just waiting for manna to drop from heaven so that they can pick them. Some are heavily relying on government bailout facilities or government facility to cushion them. We all heard about NBSSI package for SMEs. And sometimes the money that they promise you, you will never even get 10% of that. Some people have just given up because those who apply for maybe 1,000 CDs will get about 100 CDs or 200 CDs. And the entrepreneurs will tell you, this is what is happening. I'm not making up stories on this platform. But the point I'm making here is that you invest in your own marketing activity and that will bring you the customers. Invest in online events, a fresh way to get your team in front of prospects. Even if you were not online, you can't afford to be offline within COVID and even post-COVID. And University of Ghana is a classical example. We are struggling with online teaching because we never thought online would become something that it will become the norm, not the exception. So now, even recently, they are now training some of us to use the online platform Sakai so we can be effective when we resume to help our students. But we cannot stand aloof in times like this. And this is going to change the behavior of many organizations and institutions because now those who thought they could not be online are all online. And they are happy because online will reduce your stress, being in traffic for hours and a whole day. If you're online, you take advantage of that. Take advantage of the intimacy of your small screen, the computer that you are looking at, to talk to your key customers, your key accounts, engage them online. How are you going to deal with this crisis, your crisis response team? Focus on the most important revenue-related activity. This is not the time to waste resources. So anything that the results will take time, hold on. Do things that will generate immediate cash flow for the organization. Help put the business in a position to address long-term realities and opportunities. As I said earlier, in every crisis, there are winners and losers. But some of the short-term winners, if they are not careful, will be long-term losers because of the things that I highlighted earlier. So now let's redefine your customer loyalty. The programs, benefits, promotions, and other incentives that drove loyalty pre-COVID are unlikely to work now going forward. The buy one, get one free that you were doing, helping customers to pack their stuff when they buy from you, all these things, you can use them to ensure that people stay with you forever, or for you to win their lifetime loyalty. You can't do that. So reorganize your promotional activities, your loyalty programs and things like that. And start getting feedback from loyal customers regarding new ways of incentivizing your customers. Customers can help you by giving you ideas going forward. This is what you do that will make us stick. This is what we'll do that will come to you all the time. Take advantage of that and talk to your customers going forward. And how to get all done. After all said and done, how are you going to get the benefit of what I've said so far? Review your current market or marketing plan and focus on areas that will give you the highest return. It is good to plan, but don't forget, don't plan with the assumption that we cannot make any changes. So when you are moving forward and there's a blockage, do you still try to go beyond that? No, you make a U-turn. So this is the time for us to have a critical look at whatever plans that we may have and reorganize or make a U-turn. Once the main activities have been identified, do them constantly and consistently. Measure your results and keep refining to become better. SMEs, majority of them, including myself, we hardly take stock, evaluate what we are doing. But this is the time for you to constantly reassessing everything that you are doing. And those things that are not working means they are not adding any value to your business. You need to rethink on those things. And remember, COVID has changed the business landscape forever. But don't let collapse your marketing activities. Doing so can put you at a risk of losing the momentum and also losing money. Although COVID has changed the way we do things, that should not also influence the way you do your marketing, because if you decide to sit down, doing nothing will not solve the problem. In fact, if you are not doing anything, you are doing something. Sitting is also something. If you are sitting down, not doing anything, you are doing something. So we have to understand that marketing going forward in this COVID time is the key. In conclusion, we should try and overtake our competitors, create uncontested market space, the blue ocean idea, because competition will not help you in this COVID or in any crisis period, because the crisis has already increased your cost. So if you are competing with others, that will further put pressure on your finances as a business. So try and take advantage of what is happening and be unique, create your own economy so that you can lead in that economy. Learn more about your target audience, how they are also changing because of this. Because as a result of COVID, some people are now redundant. They are not having any cash. So that has also affected their purchasing power. And therefore, we have to build profitable relationships. Focus on your 20% that is giving you 80% of your revenue. It's very important in crisis management. And set yourself up for success post-COVID-19. As we all know, this too shall pass. And when everything is all said and done, where would you find yourself as a business? Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts on dealing with COVID, and also sharing my experience as an entrepreneur in this crisis time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kwame Adom. I am going to open up for a conversation of the people who have stayed with us. Those of our friends who have joined us on Facebook, I would crave your indulgence to post your questions on the Facebook link, and then I will read them. But let me come to the Zoom room and get a sense of what questions people have. Yes, so the floor is open for questions. I have a question first, so whilst I wait for the first person to indicate to me, I want to ask Dr. Kwame Adom, the craze to take advantage of a pandemic situation, and you explained one of them. There was the other one that had to do with the procurement, the supply of, how do we call those things? The windshield, is that how they call them?
Yeah.
The face shield, huh?
Yeah.
So, because I think that what has been one of the major challenges that small businesses have had, in some cases that have led to the collapse of some businesses, have been the craze to take advantage of a boom of a situation like this. And because this is a very fluid system, many people get their monies into it. In fact, in some cases, it is borrowed money. How do we make a sense between taking advantage of a crisis that brings opportunity, but also staying very cautious that we don't follow the crocodile deep into the water and get swallowed by the group crocodiles? Well, how do we balance that? Because to be honest, it appeared very, very lucrative when it started. My wife gave me trouble at home and said she needed money to go and also do the business. And I told her that, look, things that move this quick can be, but how do we, because it looks like this is something that is happening very often to our small and medium businesses.
Right, okay, let me start from this angle. People are very greedy, especially in crisis situations. They rather have short-term assessment of the situation instead of long-term. It happened during the doomsday era. A lot of people thought we were going to stay in doomsday forever. So they borrowed money to procure a lot of generators. And some of them are still having the generators unsold because they had a very short view of the situation. And that is why I highlighted that in crisis situation, you should limit the creation of new businesses. Because if you are not careful, at the initial stages of COVID, a face mask was sold around 7 cedis. Now even 1 cedi, people don't buy. And those who procure them, I believe did not get them at 1 cedi, maybe more than that. But here they are selling them at a cedi. And that is why I also pointed that the short-term winners in the long term may be the long-term losers because of the myopic nature of assessing the situation before they even start creating new business out of this. Take the alcoholic beverage industry, especially those who do bitters. All of a sudden, they are all producing hand sanitizers. And how many of us, even at the moment, are using hand sanitizers? Maybe a few. So all those people, they've committed huge resources into the production of those products, and customers are not buying them. So what I can say is we need to do proper assessment of every crisis situation before we take advantage of it.
Thank you very much. Now let me come to the floor. Do we have any questions on the floor for our friend, Dr. Kwame Adom, who himself is a practicing businessman. When I get broke, I go to him and ask for a small,
Hey,
I owe you. So yes, do we have any other questions? I have another question, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Those of us who are small businesses or have businesses to do now, or do have brothers and sisters who we need to talk to. This was meant largely for business people and business, but the reason why we ask, and I particularly ask him to talk around those lines, that we have had a lot of people join the conversation, and sometimes it gets too academic for the benefit of the business community. So today we wanted to be able to reach out to them. I know the people who are watching on Facebook may be getting a lot of insights into the conversation. But let me get back to you. If you have a question, please show by hands and go ahead. Otherwise, let me ask another question. We've seen governments making interventions to try and help small and medium businesses. Would you advise, and I'm saying this, will you advise this very cautiously, will you advise people who are rushing to get help from business, from government, to proceed to do that, especially if it is established that government will collect this money back? Because I know there are some cases when government gives money like this, it doesn't get the money back or it doesn't collect it back. But let's assume that government is going to get this money back. Is it a case that you would advise people to still go ahead and collect, or you would caution business people, especially small and medium business people, to go collecting these monies, especially if they are not too sure about how this is going to impact on their business growth and expansion?
Okay, it is good to get a helping hand in crisis so that you can come out of that crisis situation. But if you look at the bailout or the help that government is giving to SMEs, on paper it might look juicy, but on the ground it's not like that. So that money is not actually going to change the lives of SMEs overnight. Some may not even commit that financial resources into their business. They will just use it. Because if you need, for example, 10,000 Ghana cedis and you are giving 200 or 500 Ghana cedis, what are you going to do with 200 or 500 Ghana cedis? So in the first place, the money is not enough. The government support for SMEs is not enough. And only few businesses may again benefit from the government intervention. So yes, it's a good idea to help SMEs. But if you are helping me, going back to the Ubuntu idea, if I want you to be happy because I'm happy, and whatever I give you will not make you happy, what have I done to you? Maybe I've worsened your situation or your plight. So if indeed we are going to help SMEs, then the help should be a meaningful help, something that can change their lives a little to put them on a growing path post-COVID.
Any other questions, please? I have another one. So, but let me see people who are wanting to ask questions. Is there anyone? I
want to make a comment.
Yes, please. Dr. Asiama.
It's Prof. Aminu.
Oh, it's Prof. Aminu?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Prof. Aminu, please go ahead. When you finish, Dr. Yabo Asiama will make his comment.
Okay. My comment is more to support Dr. Kwame's point about lack of enough resources for SMEs. And, you know, SMEs is an area of my interest. You know, we are doing this work with Professor Justice as well. The issue, I mean, funds are not enough anywhere anyway. And that's why to bring the concept of Ubuntu as you intimated. And also there is we call economics theories also have argued, you know, there is a limit to competition, even getting, you know, competing for funds. It has its own limits because of lack of resources. So the question is, if you have funds that you support SMEs, and then the funds are not enough to go around, what do you do? Some economists argue that actually, you know, too much competition will end in what they call cannibalism. You know, each one is competing with each other. One of them will die actually, and nobody will survive. So the point some economists argue is, why not just bring them all together under one roof, instead of saying everybody should run his own business? So for instance, if you have funds to provide to support SMEs in one sector, rather than splitting the funds across all the people, why don't ask them, all of them, to come under one roof to use that money, where each one will benefit for a particular activity if they are in the same sector, rather than just picking winners, because that's the rational action theories. And this is, they pick winners when others might not be successful, and they neglect them. Now, each person or each business has something to contribute. So combine them together and then let them decide where they're gonna put the money in one particular activity in the production chain, and they benefit from it. But the way we do it, particularly in Africa, some people don't even have the skills to run a business. When they are given funds, they deny others, those who have the skills. So instead of identifying the skill of that person and say, okay, you are not good at running business, but you may be good at supporting the business. So come under that business and you all benefit from the funds. But we don't do it like that. And that's one of the problems that you find, especially in Africa, where there is no other support.
Thank you very much. I'm excited at the conversation, but Dr. Yabu Asiama, are you there?
Hello, Prof, I'm here.
Please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I would want to ask a follow-up question. You know, you asked an initial question, and my question, you know, directly follows what you, Prof. Bawule, asked Dr. Adom regarding, you know, how best entrepreneurs wouldn't, you know, follow the crocodile very deep into the river, such that it will be difficult for them to return. So, and then in answering, he mentioned that, you know, there is a need to assess, or if you like, diagnose very well. But my follow-up question is, in more practical terms, how is the entrepreneur, you know, going to really diagnose the situation very well? And then, for instance, be as it may, in a pandemic, there are many things that are very needed, you know, by society. For instance, you know, within the shortest possible time, people needed access to sanitizers, if you like, face masks and what have you. So there were many companies such as, if you like, Casaprecon, they had to retool their production capacities into, you know, production of these sanitizers. But, and then for instance, if you also go to Kotoka, some private enterprise staff invested in this scanning, equipment and what have you. So, but then these things are usually short-lived. So, and then entrepreneurs need to recoup their investment within the shortest possible time such that they don't incur losses. My question is, does that in any way, attempt to explain why most of these entrepreneurs would want to charge exorbitant prices, so that their investments will not go waste? Because if we like it or not, in the short time, society needs it. Society needs it. And as rational actors also, they are also thinking of how best to recoup this investment such that when this pandemic, is over, or when these funds which are really described as needed resources are no longer very much needed, then their investment also do not go waste. So how do we place this? Are they being too, if you like, individualistic or egoistic, if you like, rational, let me use this, very calculus in nature, or they are...
Okay, I think he made the point, so I can maybe comment on it, or?
Yes, please. I think you should proceed to comment on it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Yeboah-Siama. Yes. One thing that entrepreneurs sometimes forget is that the opportunity is not unique to you. This is an open opportunity. Provided you have resources, you can change your production plant or whatever you want to do, and then take advantage of the opportunity. So whether you want to charge initial high price or premium price for your product also depends on what the competition is doing. If at a point we could have maybe 5 or 10 organizations producing sanitizers, and there's no way you can charge more than what the industry average may be. So in crisis situation, if you try to invest with the hope that, oh, you can recoup your investment as quickly as possible, you may be making mistakes. Why? Because you don't have control over the customers. They decide to buy from you. You cannot force any customer to buy from you. So you take it a gradual approach towards you taking advantage of the opportunity. Those who invested so heavily, like the example I gave you, this Core FX before the pandemic was 100 cedis or 80 cedis some places. Immediately, the country went on lockdown. It went up to 300, some places 350. And those who were selling it 350 got it more than 200. And that's why they were selling it above their cost. But in the end, those guys are losers. I had a pharmacist in my class, one of the classes, that at a point they needed certain amount of this product, but the price was so high that they decided not to go for it. So he was so happy when the situation came like that. So Doc, yes, doing business is about risk taking, but you need to be a bit calculated when taking risk. It's good to jump, but make sure you assess where you are going to land. If you're not careful, you jump and you never resurrect again. So that's the advice.
Thank you, Dr. Musa Surugu Justice.
Hello, thank you very much, Dr. Adom, for providing some empirical aspects of the Ubuntu using small scale enterprises.
Yeah.
I still have some questions. Maybe it will also help us to continue from where Professor left. If you look at SMEs or even the general, Ghanaian industry, when I was growing, I remember we had Akokodako or Dako farms.
Yeah.
Dako farm, it is no more like the Dako farm we used to know. My father, had some small company. The company doesn't exist anymore. And it is true that most companies do not survive beyond the forming generation. So the second generation doesn't even go to see the business. What is the fundamental reason why these businesses fail to survive beyond just one generation? We can look at the roots from the rational choice theory and this collectivism versus individualism, or this Ubuntu theory, because the Ubuntu theory is developed around certain concepts, which is the individualism versus the collectivism, or universalism versus relativism. And if I want to look at it from that perspective, I would say that businesses must be very rational. If you say that the business, they shouldn't think about the profit, then that is the beginning to failure, because they need to make certain return, and that return will allow them to be able to stay in business. So what is the unit of analysis? The unit of analysis is always to look at the survival, the sustainability of the business for it to be able to provide the services that it's even providing to society. So for me, I would always want us to really be able to move to a point where we'll be able to, get some kind of benefit from the actions that we are taking. But if we really want to always talk about the fact that collectivism, we need to help everybody, at the end of the day, we end up that all the businesses that we have will fail, because we think that, that employee who is not doing well, we shouldn't fire him because of collectivism. That guy who is owing me, he has not paid, but I should still give him more supply. And that will lead to the failure of the business. So that also provides some of the evidence of the limitations in our Ubuntu theory. And I'll end by saying that the biggest theory in the world that we are yet to disprove is either the creation theory or the evolution theory. And if you look at both of them, all of them is about the theory, the principle of the rational choice theory. Because if you look at creation, God didn't do everything the same day. He was being rational. He realized the first day I can do this, second day I can do this, third day I can do this, seventh day I need to rest. That was a rational choice theory. If you look at it from evolution perspective, and you look at the feeding trophy, some insects need to feed on other things, so those will suffer, and the insect will survive. The insect will also have to die, and will give nutrients to the soil, and will grow crops, and human beings will feed on it. And that is also rational choice in the feeding system. So for me, the best thing that we need to promote as an African society that will bring about the transformational development that we need is to be able to build our society based on cost-benefit analysis. And that sends us back to the principle of what? Rational choice theory. So this is a contribution and not really a question to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. But I also want to make some corrections from what you put across. I think I've never said business is not about money. In fact, business is about making money. So if you are running a business and you are not making money, you may be in the wrong business. Even social entrepreneurship, which focuses on doing good by making money, they are not like Father Christmas. They make money. They use the commercial business model to run social enterprises. So every business that you are doing, the monetary aspect of the business is so key for the survival of the business. But talking about why businesses fail in Ghana, for me as somebody who has been working with the SMEs, it is not about the profitability of the business. Sometimes the business is growing and you can die whilst you are growing. Like some of us, we die whilst our music is still playing. So certain businesses die whilst they are growing. The point is, a lot of them don't know how to manage their growth. People think having multiple locations or multiple outlets is about growth. That's not about growth. And we have a classical business in Ghana that I can cite. Look at Papaya. Papaya has been here for about 30 years or so. And how many branches do we have? But some people or some entrepreneurs who open a business today, tomorrow we have branches all over the place. How do you control, how do you manage such wide activities? And that is the major cause of businesses dying in this country.
Okay, Dr. Asiama, is your hand up again?
Hello, Prof. Yes, yes, my hand is up again.
Okay, please.
Yes, I had wanted to make a contribution to the Ubuntu discussion by Professor.
Earlier. Okay, right.
Yes,
right.
yes.
Go ahead.
And so as Dr. Surugu has just, ushered us into that discussion, I would like to come in. See, the whole idea of Ubuntu, needs a broader, we need to adopt a broader thinking in order to understand. Otherwise, one will reduce it to more reductionist, approach. For instance, Musa cited an example using the Akoko Dako case. Say if an employee is not working well, and then the person is sacked, because of collectivism, we will say don't sack the person. But then if we adopt a more comprehensive view of Ubuntu, then that individual who is an employee should, adopt the principle of Ubuntu, will not behave in an unethical manner towards the company, right? Because the thing is, someone has set up a business, you are employed, you are benefiting. Ubuntu tells you that as an employee, you need to think about the collectivity, because if the company fails, you all fail together and block, right? So, if we should encourage the spirit of Ubuntu philosophy, I think everybody, everybody benefits at the end of the day. It is not to the manager, but to the employee and the manager and the families of both the employees and then the managers. Then also, the idea of employee is that I am because we are. So once you are thinking of the collective society, you are thinking of yourself also. But as Prof. Aminu mentioned, if you go by the strictly rational choice theory, which is very calculus, self-maximizing, at the end of the day, we are going to have a few rich people. And if you have a few rich people amidst, many who are poor or, who are, worse off in society, you are not secured. That's your small riches. You use everything to buy arms, and then if you get bodyguards around you, your house, when you are good, you are not safe because the entire society is not safe. So only the few who are, rational or calculus are going to benefit. So for instance, if you look at most welfare policies, so Musa will say, if you go to, these advanced countries, they are using purely rational choice and they are better off. You see, can we say most, social interventions such as, free SHS and unemployment benefits, these are also underneath them, they have the principle of Ubuntu, because that is what humanness on entire society, because it's not about just the few who can afford. No, we are in a competition. So one who can afford the best school you pay, then your world goes. Now it is open for everybody. We have unemployment benefits in these European countries, such that when businesses are collapsing, the state will intervene and bring everybody to the same level. All these, underneath them, the principles of Ubuntu, are underneath them. So we need to have a very broader view of Ubuntu, other than what, see it in a more reductionist approach. You see, you come to Africa, we have all the institutions, all the laws. So I call it the calculus of corruption. We have the laws there, but the laws actually, those who are to employ, they engage in some networks such that we make the laws very loose. The laws are not applicable. But the thing is, if we are to adopt the principle of Ubuntu, or if we are to go beyond rhetorics and to deploy them, our leaders, then everybody, the resources of the state should be deployed for the use of for the entire citizenry, rather than say we have the laws. But we know that the laws are enforced by human beings. We can deactivate the effectiveness of the law. So this whole discussion, requires a very broader overview. Okay, so just last year I had a paper, published in the Journal of Global Responsibility, right? Ubuntu and public sector leadership. Once we adopt this in the governance processes at the macro, meso, and micro level, once everybody is brought on board, the whole society, moves on. But if we say strictly rational choice theory, only the survivor, fittest, survival of the fittest, and only a few will survive. Those who are unable to survive, they are going to feed on the very few who are better off. And so at the end of the day, nobody prospers because you prosper and then others will need to feed on you.
Right. So we lost him there. But I have another Manchester scholar. So on the line now.
So that is my contribution. Right.
Okay. All right. Sorry, we missed you at some point. So this was not to cut you, but we lost your voice at some point. And I'm excited at the conversation and the way it's going. I mean, those of us who have read a little bit about the culture of work in Japan, which also goes to the conversation that Dr. Adom had with us about the survival of small and medium businesses. I think one of the critical issues have been the behavior of staff who are employees of these businesses, such that, like he said, you are in a hurry and you create so many branches. It means that you're going to be relying on a lot of people. And then a lot of the people do not see the mutunchi in the business, which is that if my brother's business does well whilst I work with him, it benefits me as well. And then they start misbehaving and they destroy the business. And then we all get to the same level where there is no business for the businessman and there's no work for the employee. Ibrahim, are you there? Hello, Ibrahim Mohammed? Barima Ahmed, are you there? I can see your hand up. Please unmute yourself and then give us your contribution. Hello.
The network, maybe it's no.
Yeah. Is that snow in Manchester? Ibrahim, please unmute yourself and then go ahead and speak, please.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening. Now we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Yeah, so Prof and Dr. Adom. No, it's not snowing yet.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Right, we can't hear you now. We have lost you again.
Oh.
Yes. Unmute yourself. You have muted yourself. So unmute yourself. Yeah. Okay. Now go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, God. Yeah. So
the Manchester.
I think he has a problem with the bandwidth.
Yes, I think there's a problem, Ibrahim. When you unmute yourself, we hear you, but it looks like there's a problem.
Let me just add a comment before he comes back.
Yes, please. You can go ahead. Yes, Prof.
Yeah. I just want to add to what Dr. Emmanuel said, and also to combine it with your comment about the Japanese system. There are so many examples of how developed countries are using this idea of Ubuntu, even though they don't call it Ubuntu. As I said it much earlier, that some of the principles are nothing new to other parts of the world. The Japanese, for example, that's why they call it coordinated market. The Japanese operate coordinated market economy. Honda, Mitsubishi, Toyota, when they started, they were not competing with each other in Japan. That's one. They don't compete with each other. Secondly, they have a conglomerate of a company, financial institutions, that they put all their money there. and they support all the companies. It's only when they come out of Japan that they compete. The same thing with South Korea. South Korean company, you know, they have the same, they adopted the same economic model of Japanese. So this is what Ubuntu is encouraging, that to survive, you have to cooperate. But also when it comes to cooperation, each member, as Emmanuel was saying before, each member of that group must abide by the rule of the game. Because you can't have rationality, a rational action theory and Ubuntu working side by side. No, it doesn't work like that. Neither can we have a rational action theory economy, and then you go in there, you want to operate Ubuntu. It doesn't work. You either do one or the other. So if you do one, it will work. And that's why I say we don't have an example of Ubuntu. So therefore, it's easier to criticize it and say it's not going to work. But if you set up a company where members of the company live by the philosophy, you won't have free riders, because the problem is about free riding. So you think, well, if I do this, there will be free riding. I mean, to just give another example of Ubuntu, is Finland. Finland have experimented that everybody should receive about 2,000 euros, whether they are working or not, free to monthly salary. And they tested and find out whether people are free riding. And they demonstrated that it's a very insignificant number who are free riding. That salary that they were receiving, which is not social security at all, they defined it as salary. And it's working. Another example is to show that human nature is not what rational action theory seems to suggest. In Harvard, maybe a few decades ago, they did an example. They asked the students to sit for an exam. They sat them for an exam, and they asked them to mark it themselves. To mark it, just give you the marks that you think you deserve. And when they marked it, they found approximately 70% of the marks that the students gave to themselves were the same marks that the teacher would have given. Then they found the people who overrated themselves were similar to people who underrated themselves, because there were some people who underrated themselves. But broadly speaking, significant majority, about 70 to 75%, they gave the marks that the teacher would have given. So this rational action theory hasn't been tested within a different paradigm. If we try a different paradigm, we would be surprised, because there is an experiment already there. The former finance minister of Greece, even though he's a kind of, some people call him a communist, but he's not a communist. But he has a formula now, and he's been written, he's a Oxford graduate, and he became a finance minister. Now he's back to Oxford, and he's a professor there. But he came up with an idea of the same idea that Finland practiced. He said the way to address inequality in the world, especially in developed world, not Africa, is really to adopt the Finland model. Just provide everybody salary. Just give them salary. That is enough to motivate them. There might be some few, if you like, free riders, and you will find free riders, but it's not as significant as to damage the economy. It's not. So the key here is, to cut the long story short, is that the history of human evolution has proven that cooperation is much, much better for survival and prosperity than naked individualism and competition. And naked individualism and competition, the outcome of it is what we have today. One, the world cannot come together and address climate change, inequality everywhere, terrorism, migration, and all that. So, but if we just look closer to ourselves, we might think it's working. But broadly speaking, it's not working. Scientists and social scientists, like economists, are proving, are telling us this naked individualism and competition really is not good for humanity at all. It's not good. And for Africa, we don't need to. I mean, I'm really happy to see somebody sent me, I mean, for example, if you go into politics, we are told, because the rational action theory is in politics now, we are told the best way we can develop our people is through democracy, creating political parties start competing with each other on policy and all that. Now, since Africa went into democracy, you can hardly find one country that uses other countries as an example, as a role model, apart from recent with Rwanda. But you go to any country, when you hear people talking, giving an example of something good, they mention Europe, America, they mention Dubai, they mention, why are you not mentioning some country around you? Because there isn't. There isn't. And it's this competition. Everything is about competition. People should compete. But the West have found out, and the reason why you have problem in people electing wrong people in America and Europe is all that kind of thing. So the weak countries and the weak people become a problem for the rest. So, but you can't practice Ubuntu when people are thinking using the rational action theory cap. It will not work. So they have to think in the same way like Ubuntu, then it will work. If they don't think that way, then obviously it will not work. Also in Ubuntu, just last final comment, Ubuntu, it doesn't mean that if you are running a company and somebody is not behaving humanly, you excommunicate him, you can sack him. So Ubuntu doesn't tolerate laziness. There is a sense of duty and responsibility in Ubuntu. So if you don't want to be human, then you're out. So Ubuntu is not a picnic. It's not a picnic at all. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the philosophy is about. It's not collectivism of communism at all. It's not communism. It's not socialism. You know, you have responsibility.
Great. Ahmed, can you hear me? Try, let's see if we can hear you now. Ahmed, you just muted yourself. Please unmute and let's try and see if we can hear. Okay, great.
I did. Hello.
Yes.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so my question is, I was wondering, Prof. Aminu, isn't Ubuntu maybe an attempt to, crave for what we think should be the case, instead of what can realistically be the case? So for instance, if you look at the kind of society that people like Marx thought we should have, and what the historical processes are likely to lead us to have. It appeared that we couldn't have, those societies the way they envisaged. In much the same way, it appears to me that we seem to think that there is a certain ideal kind of society that can help us prosper in the ways that we want. But given the dynamics of the modern world, do we really think that such a society is possible? And if so, what should we do to attain such a society?
Okay, it's a good question, but I will answer. I will answer your question with a story. I'm sure many of you heard about it, and I've narrated it before. A story of a bush Fulani man came trying to cross a road, cross the river, and he found somebody dead on the river of the bank, and by the river of the bank, and he asked bank of the river, sorry, and he asked the people, "What's happening?" He said, "Oh well, this guy was trying to cross the river, and he drowned because he couldn't swim." And then the poor man said, he said, "Oh, what a stupid man! Why didn't he walk along the river until he gets to the beginning of the tributary and turn make a U-turn instead of crossing the river?" So the people look at him, they say, "Bushman, how long is he gonna go and trace the beginning of the river and turn around? It's gonna take very long time." He said, "Yeah, I understand, but where he's lying here, when is he gonna wake up?" You see? So the point is here is, if we say, okay, Ubuntu is just too utopian. It's too utopian. Despite the fact that there is evidence again, and I keep bringing people to the evidence, even in animal kingdom, somebody mentioned animal kingdom. There's evidence in, I don't know, some of you have watched the, what do you call them? Penguins in the Antarctic. The penguins, how they survive in wintry condition, they couple up together, and each one in the center of the cycle will have to come out, and the one outside to replace him in order to keep the warmth. So if you use rational action theory, you will say the guy in the middle, the penguin in the middle, because he's covered by those outside, he will refuse to come out. But the penguins are not stupid. They know if they don't come out and be replaced by the people who are covering them, when the people who are the penguins that are covering them, when they froze to death, they will also freeze to death. So even penguins realize that cooperation for survival is necessary, and that's how penguins in the Antarctic really survive during the winter. That's how they survive. So, and also that's why the biologists tell us the origin of the species was through cooperation. So we reach, basically, it seems to me, we reach a stage in the life cycle where we have to go back to where we came from, which is cooperation. Because if we don't cooperate, if we use the rational action theory, we are depleting the ozone layer. We are exhausting our own resources. And because of one country say, well, if I reduce my carbon footprint, my economy will collapse. I'm not gonna do it. And another one is gonna. So at the end of the day, like the case of penguin, we might destroy ourselves. So yes, I agree with the point that you can achieve ideal. You know, the earth is not a place where you're gonna achieve ideal anyway. Ideal should be somewhere else. But that does not mean you shouldn't struggle to survive by finding alternative. And the final point about the communism. Communism failed because the people didn't live by the communism. And I also believe that if we were to establish Ubuntu, it doesn't mean Ubuntu is not gonna fail. Ubuntu will fail if people within the system didn't live by the ideals of Ubuntu. But the fact that some people will try to misbehave in the philosophy doesn't mean you shouldn't try it. Since we know what we are using now is failing us. So that's the argument. But make no mistake, Ubuntu is not going to be ideal. But Ubuntu has proven through our human evolution, through what we see the animal kingdom are doing for their own survival, shows that we have to cooperate. Some animals, they cooperate to hunt. We know them. A lot of animals like the hyenas, they cooperate through hunting. If one of them just said, okay, I'm gonna stay at home, go and hunt for me, they're all gonna die. So it's part of the human nature, but the rational action theory tells us, no, that is not, the cooperation is not our nature. But actually, cooperation is our nature. That's what I said. But it's not going to be ideal. I'm not going to say that this is going to be a kind of walk in the park and everybody's going to live by that. No, it's not going to, it might fail, but that does not, the fact that it's going to fail doesn't mean you can't try.
So now I have the singular honor and privilege to say thank you to all of you for spending time this evening with us. The essence of this conversation is to stir up controversy. And as I keep saying, it is meant for us to disrupt thoughts and in that process reconstruct thoughts. So that is why we instituted this seminar series. But of course, so we can also discuss the impact of COVID in all of this. I get the conversation about whether or not there is Ubuntu is an utopian philosophy. Well, every theory or philosophy has good and bad sides. Many of us, and I am a product of the Ubuntu of my community, where, but for the collective support of the community, people had their own children who didn't go to school, but they were willing to help you because you were in school. They were willing to share. They gave you food when you were hungry and stuff like that. Why? Because you are part of the community. And nobody cared about what the outcome will be, whether or not you will be good to be able to come and support them back or not give them anything. People didn't care. They just found a young man who needed help and out of, let me help because it could be me. And if, he does well, why not? So I think that when we stretch it too far, we will probably get it into being very similar or close to rationality, which then will be that, well, they were helping you because they knew that if you did well and whatever. But reality is that people have choices. And when they make the choice to be communal and to help others just because they think that others are, then that choice ceases to be a rational choice, because that rational choice could have been that, well, let me keep my food for my own children, because that's rationality.
Yes.
Yeah, but they gave it to you anyways. So I think that, as I said, the essence of this is to stir up these conversations. And the young scholars in this place, I want to challenge you to pursue some of these in your research line and try to interrogate the conversation, come up with some things that will challenge the narrative and help us to build better a philosophical position for Ubuntu. But let me say a big, big, big thank you to our two speakers. First, to Professor Aminu for spending your evening with us. We intended that this happened earlier. It couldn't, but thank you that you accepted to do this evening, and I'm excited. As I said, this is recorded and it is also live on Facebook, so it's available for people on Facebook. Once you go to my wall, you will find this video and you can watch it. We're also going to do an edited version and put it on our YouTube channel. So this will be available for watching for many years to come. Dr. Kwame Adom, thank you very much for agreeing and taking up the challenge when I called you at short notice and said, we want you to share experiences to our community on SMEs and how they can survive this pandemic. I know you're a very busy person too. And the two of you, together with all of our people who joined, thank you for making time to stay with us this evening. It is past 8 o'clock, it's almost 9 o'clock in Ghana time, and in the UK, it's almost 10 o'clock. I think this is a huge sacrifice for us, and we appreciate it. The business school will continue to engage you on other platforms, but on this occasion, on behalf of the management of the business school and on my own behalf, I say thank you very much to both our speakers and our participants. Thank you.